Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.
Yeah, sorry, Prof. Siti Hawa. I'm afraid I'll have to take over.
No problem, it's okay.
Because the rider still having problems.
It's all right, yes.
Let me
Okay.
just get the details first. Okay, inshallah. Okay, let's start our new session this afternoon by reciting Ummah Kitab Al-Fatihah.
Oh.
Okay, I'll just start my video. I hope Dr. Azni can help with the hosting and Brother Aziz as well. Okay, before we start, I'd like to introduce our speaker, although she's very popular among IIUM lecturers, I suppose, and many already waiting to get the recordings because because we have 4 parallel conferences, so many of the lecturers
I see.
conferences as well.
I see, okay.
Yes. However, still, I think we still have a good number of participants here. Currently, it's recording at 38, the number of participants.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, despite the popularity of our keynote speaker today, this time, I'd like just kindly briefly introduce again Prof. IR Dr. Siti Hawa Hamzah. She already retired as a professor, Prof, from IIUM Shah Alam. Currently, she is a director at BEM, Board Engineers Malaysia. And yes, she is also IIM council member. She was in civil and structural engineering from IIUM Shah Alam. And with the BEM, she is the director of the accreditation department. So it's why the topic is also that she's going to deliver today is very relevant to us. And hopefully, all the lecturers from the Kulliyyah of Engineering, IIUM especially, can learn a lot from this keynote speech, inshallah. Right, okay. The title of the keynote speech is addressing WP and EA in the teaching learning activities of engineering program. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor IR Professor Dr. Siti Hawa Hamzah to deliver her keynote speech for us this session today. Thank you very much. Okay, you can start, Prof.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dr. Ali. Thank you so much. First of all, we'd like to thank all the committee members, especially Dr. Sarina, for inviting me to this particular auspicious event. And she mentioned that the specific title should be something about WP and EA. So I was actually preparing a different form of a presentation, but when it was requested, the WP and EA became the highlight this afternoon. So I think that wouldn't be of any difficulty to me because it's our bread and butter from the EAD. All right, so briefly, let me introduce our team. The EAD team, we have 11 ADs, 6 for the EAC program and 5 for the ETEC program. And we have 10 secretariat members. And most importantly, when I came on board, the MCO kicks in. So we have to change the way that we do things in the department. We have to change. I'm not too worried about having meeting online, but the thing is to prepare ourselves for the virtual accreditation. And we, for 2021, beginning of, we went for a physical visit only for the first 2 weeks in January. And when it kicks in with the second MCO, we got to move on board with what we have already prepared. And I have to push down all of the accreditation visit until March. So since March, we have been conducting all our visit on a virtual platform. There are a lot of challenges, definitely. And since we are now undergoing the third MCO, we will be continuing the virtual accreditation visit until the end of this year. So therefore, the whole year of 2021 will be done on a virtual platform. So basically, all of these ADs are having a tough time having to read all the documents online and having to also try to get evidences online. So it is really very challenging to all. Basically, this is our accreditation historical journey. In 2000, we formed up the EAC. And soon after that, we were actually given the purview of becoming the full signatory status to Washington Accord. And then followed through, we have the Sydney Accord and also the Dublin Accord. So now under IIUM, we have all the 3 accords, all the 3 educational accords. Now we are moving to another 2 agreements. We already have APAC engineers and IPR engineers. And we are moving into the technology and also the technician agreement. And if we have the technician and the technologies agreement, then we are now a complete signatory of the IEA platform. And thereby, it will allow the mobility of our graduates for WA to 20 other countries, for Sydney Accord, that is the Bachelor of Engineering Technologies, to 10 other countries beside Malaysia, and then for the Dublin Accord to 8 other countries, right? So this is the most important thing and the most important platform as why we want to proceed and get our accreditation under the Board of Engineers Malaysia. So for 2020, we have to come up with the TLA guiding principle. So that was one on the 18th of March, we have the first MCO. So immediately we came up with the TLA guiding principle because we have lots of questions from our stakeholders on how to conduct the TLA, the teaching, learning and assessment. And we came up with accreditation SOPs, and then we tried to resume our physical visit. But then again, we have to conduct our first virtual accreditation visit to IKM Bintulu, that was in September. Then later we continue with the physical visit. But then again, as I already mentioned earlier on this year, we have to go back to our full virtual accreditation visit. So these are our standards. We started way back in the year of the year 2000 with the OBE awareness. And now we have actually become outcome evident, and we have actually take OBE as part of our culture. And with the introduction or the revision of the 2020 standard for all the 3 jurisdictions, the WA, the SA, and also the DA, we are actually taking on board and taking seriously the graduate attributes and also the professional competency that had been mentioned in 2013 seriously. However, there is a surprise that I will share with you later. But then again, there are many universities that are still having problem in trying to show the evidences of our WP and also our EA. And bear in mind that our accreditation now, and it has been all the while, is on outcome evidence, in this outcome-based evidence, right? So this is the statistic of our accreditation as of the 1st of January 2021. These are the number of programs that we have. So we have now a total of close to about 400 to almost 500 programs that had been accredited by the Board of Engineers under the diploma, the BTEC, and also the BEng. And for 2021 visits alone, there'll be about close to 300 programs that we are going to visit this year. And we only completed 20, I think about 20 or 21 program that is done on a physical mode. The remaining 280 program had been done on the virtual platform. And it is really quite demanding. Well, basically, I wouldn't say it's quite, it is actually very demanding and very challenging. Today, we only have 696 panels. We are still short of panels, and we are also conducting our new panel workshop on the virtual platform. Basically, this is how we move about since the MCO kicked in last year. So we came up with the guiding principle of the TLA, and then we revised it recently. And in this revision, we have actually included a lot of issues with respect to the industrial training. So I think the Kulliyyah have already received this particular revision, and there have been lots of questions being asked regarding to the clarification to some of the examples that we have given in. So then we also came out with the EAC and ETEC procedure, whereby all of the new cycle and the new program accreditation will take place on a physical mode. The rest will be done on a desktop or even a virtual platform. So then it went on nicely for the second half of the year, but then, you know, there is a limbo. Some places we have a CMCO, some will have a EMCO. So we have to shift our schedule, and our schedule has been very dynamic. It has been changing from one date to another date. And some of the program even have to change the visit date to almost 6 to 7 times before we can actually materialize the visit. So that is one of the challenging situation that we have. And also to move our panel from a red zone area to a green zone area, that will be also another issue. So these are all the issues that we have actually been facing last year. And when we go out this year on a physical mode for the first half of January, we were again slapped with the second MCO. And then we actually decided to make everything on a virtual platform. And because of that, we have actually to revise the virtual platform accreditation SOPs, and it will be conducted with the new SOP beginning of the 1st August 2021. Okay, so let's deal with the business that we are in today, which is on the WP and EA. And there have been many questions on how can we really, you know, evidence out WP and EA under the online platform. So I would share with you some of the evidences that you can actually, you know, get on, and you can actually discuss with your team members. And also the evaluators, or probably the vetters of the examination paper or the assessment, will also have to look into how to moderate the WP and EA evidences. Okay, so finally you should be having the EA, WA packaging of WK, WP and EA. We have been talking about, a lot about the Bloom taxonomy. I'm not saying here that Bloom taxonomy is no longer relevant. It is very much relevant, but we are now taking our assessment to another level up, where we need to really materialize the WK, WP, and also EA. Okay, the terminologies, WP, some may call it as CPS, some may call it as P, some may call it as CP. But the terminology under the IEA platform will be WP. W means the Washington Accord. That means it's meant for engineering program. So WP means a complex problem solving, and EA is a complex engineering activities. So we normally address our PO as program outcome, or it is also known as graduate attributes. And we have a knowledge profile that must come along under the graduate attributes or the PO. Now, this is very important. We have been actually stressing this a lot, and we have been discussing this also a lot in our panel's report. It is very important to see that the TLA is properly aligned. When we talk about the constructive alignment, how do you consider your learning outcome? How do you take up your instruction? And how do you get the assessment? How is the measurement being done? And where is the CQI? So this constructive alignment process is so important that many of the programs that came about are still struggling in trying to ensure that the instruction and the assessment are mapped properly, especially when you're talking about it is a psychomotor domain, therefore the assessment has to be in a psychomotor form. There are many confusion where the cognitive domain is being assessed as a psychomotor assessment. Thus, the constructive alignment, when it is not properly laid, then you will not get the proper attainment of your learning outcome. And when there is no proper attainment of the learning outcome, it will actually affect the program outcome. So panels are actually looking for the program outcome. And when we bring this particular constructive alignment process to another level up, where we need to consider WP and EA, where in WP, it will also address the WK, and WK is actually the knowledge profile, and knowledge profile is related to cognitive. So therefore, when we are aligning all of these activities, we must be sure that the instruction will actually address all the learning outcome and they are properly assessed. So therefore, when we are looking at the assessment, either you are making a formative assessment or a summative assessment, whether it is going to be a direct assessment or indirect assessment, whether it is going to be at the course level or at the program level, all must be properly mapped back to your learning outcomes, right? So you must close the loop. You must have the continual quality improvement mentioned to whatever outcome that you have already attained. If the outcome attained is a good outcome and you have actually attained 100% passes, so that doesn't mean that you just need to stop. That doesn't mean that you already achieved everything. Probably the level of the assessment, the level of instruction was at the C3 or probably only C4. Why not try to bring it up to C5 and C6? And why not to now address all the WP that we have and also the EA characteristics that had been stipulated in our standard, right? So most importantly, lecturers, all the academicians, all the teachers must be able to properly align the TLA. Then only you will get the intended outcome that we have already mentioned in our 12 POs. Okay, this is very fresh from the oven, just baked last night. Last night because as the meeting was last night, because this is held with 21 other countries, with 20 other countries. So therefore they have to look at using a UTC time, which is quite relevant to all. But then again, the meeting finished up quite late. And there was another meeting at about 1 a.m., which I just could not hold on and I just dozed off. Quite sorry about that. I will just have to look at the recording later on. Now, what we call as GAPC, the GAPC is the graduate attribute and PC is the professional competency. And now it is a version for 2021. The motion passed last night. And now IEA expects that each member reviews and updates its own attribute competence requirements and gives a roadmap constituents by June 2024. So that means we are given 3 years from now on to 2024 for us to prepare the roadmap. Thus, EAD has to prepare this particular roadmap, but then again, that doesn't stop IHL to proceed and look into how they can actually come out with alignment to the GAPC version for 2021. Now, in 2024, they expect implementation. Now, so how is it going to affect Malaysia? So we're going to have our WA periodic review 2021. By right, we are supposed to have it this year. However, because of last year's event had been postponed to this year, thereby all of the program will be delayed by 1 year. So therefore, Malaysia's periodic review for WA, for the EAC program, will now happen in 2022. And for the BTEC and the diploma program will only happen in 2024. So when we are in 2022, so if UIA is going to be one of the program that is going to be visited by the review team from IEA, then you must show the roadmap. And if you have a diploma program and it is going to be conducted in 2024, then there must be implementation. So therefore, everyone has to work concurrently now. And why the GAPC version 4 came in, it is actually to include the World Federation of Engineering Organization sustainable development goals, which had been passed by WFEO. And now, instead of having only 8 knowledge profile, there will be 9. And 7 problem solving characteristic and 5 engineering activity characteristics will maintain. Instead of 12 graduate attributes that we normally have, now they are actually moving to 11, because they actually combine on PO7, which is on the sustainability and environment, into all of the other 11 graduate attributes. But then again, no worries, we are still in 2021, and since that thing is just freshly baked, we haven't really untangled everything else. So I think for what we are going to do now, we just want to ensure that any visits that is to be conducted in the remaining year of 2021 right up to 2023, to at least show evidences that you are well ahead of what we have written in here. So if you look at our graduate attributes here, it do mention about WK1, WK2, WK3, WK4, and you will see in some of them are mentioned in terms of WK8. So these are what we call as knowledge profile, right? And you will see that PO1, if you say WA1 is PO1, PO1 right up to PO7 is addressing complex engineering problem. That is what we mentioned as WP. And only PO10 is the one that mentioning our EA, complex engineering activities. So in short, you will see that I've put up in this particular layout. So you will see WP1 and WP, sorry, the PO1, which is on engineering knowledge, problem analysis, design, investigation, modern tools, engineer society, and environment and sustainability, will actually address WK1 right up to WK7. Ethics, which is doesn't mention any of the WP, but it is addressing WK7. And then for communication, it is addressing EA, right? So none in individual and teamwork, project management and finance, and lifelong learning. Soon you will see that there are changes in the individual and teamwork, project management and finance, lifelong learning in the upcoming JAPC version 4 2021. The one that I'm showing now here is only the recent version that we have in our standard. Okay, look at this particular POs. We have PO1 right up to PO5, which is addressing the analysis of problems and synthesis of solutions. So you will look at the WKs. WKs are the knowledge profile that need to be addressed. WK1 is a theory-based natural science, and then WK2 is a conceptually based mathematics. When you go to WK3, it becomes the engineering fundamentals, and WK4 becomes the specialist knowledge. So therefore, this is specified specifically in PO1 and PO2. So if you are addressing PO1 and PO2, you must address WK1, WK2, WK3, and WK4. How are you going to evidence them out? Are you going to evidence them all? So definitely there must be some kind of a rule of the game that you need to address. Similarly with PO3, PO4, and PO5. Now, when you look at responsibilities, PO6, PO7, and PO8 talk about responsibilities. And the knowledge profile that is part to PO6, 7, and 8 are WK7, which is on comprehension. So when you talk about comprehension here, it's a comprehension of engineering in society. And if you look at what are required in the workplace, is PO9, PO10, PO11, and PO12. So basically, how do you impart all of the TLA, the teaching, learning, and the assessment to address all of these POs? So these are the WK's, the definition to all and how it move about. And here is the knowledge profile, which we have addressed WK1 to WK8. And under GAPC 2021, there will be WK9, which is on ethical. This the characteristic of the complex engineering problem. So there are 7 characteristics. So we will first start with the depth of knowledge. And when you talk about the depth of knowledge, these must be addressed in all of the POs. It must be addressed in PO1, PO2, right up to PO7. WP1 must be in all PO1 to PO7. And you must also address some or all of the other WPs. So when we say some at the Board of Engineers, we agree to go with a minimum of 2. So probably you will have WP1 with WP2 and WP3, or WP1 with WP4 and WP5, or it can go on with a different combination. So what you will see here is the characteristics of the engineering problem that I've already mentioned from WP1 right up to WP7, and it must be addressed and it must be evident. I'm not saying that you have to measure them, you must evident them out. Okay? Complex engineering activities will have 5 characteristics, and it comes from the range of resources, level of interactions. Innovation is normally the easiest way in trying to evident out, right? Especially from your final year project or even from your integrated design project. And then consequences to society and environment, and also familiarity of issues. For this, you just have to address some or all. There is no compulsory characteristic as in WP. In WP, you have WP1 as compulsory, but in EA, you can choose any 2 from the 5 that we have already mentioned here, right? Now, try to come up with your own course self-assessment. Probably I am teaching mechanics. So if I'm teaching mechanics, definitely my main concern will be PO1 and probably PO2. So when I talk about PO1, it must address WP. So if I'm talking about PO1, and I must address WK1 right up to WK4. So probably I can go with WK3 and WK4, right? I am in my PO1, I am now addressing WK3, which is the engineering fundamental, right? The engineering fundamental, and also the specialist knowledge. But then again, I have to also address WP. So which one? I have to address WP1. So WP1 is now addressed as WK3 and WK4. But what are the other WP characteristics that I must address under PO1? The answer is I must address some or all. So rather than taking all, I will take some, and some probably I will take conflicting requirement, or probably I will take depth of analysis, and another one could be familiarity of issues, right? So you will do your own course assessment in order to look at what are the POs that you are actually addressing. And then only you will be able to collate what are the evidences that you want to show from your course file, from your course that you have produced for the students to undergo, and thereby you must also look back at the TLA. Now, in terms of the quality assurance, how can we ensure WP is addressed and the attainment of the POs are visible? And most importantly, how can we control that the purpose of accreditation shall not be compromised when using the alternative assessment? Now, why do I bring about the using of alternative assessment? It is very, of what the situation now, very true with the situation now. And most of us will actually now embark on the take-home exam or probably the open book exam. Say if I'm using PO on design, so which WK and which WP am I addressing? So if it's a PO number 3, we already knew that under PO number 3, if I go back to this particular slide, okay, if you look at PO number 3, under design development of solution, in the statement of that particular PO, it has already mentioned that you must address WK5. So therefore, in this particular mapping, I do not want to run away. I will address the compulsory WK5. So WK5 is on design. So therefore, I must address WP. And what knowledge profile, which knowledge profile do I want to address? So therefore, under PO3, I will address WK5. I can address two others. I can just remain just one. I can also address all if I want to, right? Okay, now the most importantly is when you start to map it, you need to show the evidences. I'm not saying that you have to measure, but you need to show the evidences that you are addressing them. So now, after addressing WK5, which other WP characteristics are you looking at? So in this case, since this is on design, the best thing is to go with WP5, which is code. So I kind of standardize it. Anything to do with design will definitely go to on code. Then I can go with WP2 on conflicting requirement, or I can still go on the depth of analysis. Or I can actually make my WP under interdependence. Okay, so it all depends on how you come up with your constructive alignment on your TLA. What are your outcomes? What are your learning instruction? And how is your assessment going to happen? So this is how you need to plan your PO attainment in addressing the WP and in also addressing your WK. All right. So I've given you some other examples. So I think I should not spend too much of a time showing you around with the example. You can, I will share the slide later, right? So under MCQ, so MCQ, why I put up MCQ here? Because there have been questions, lots of questions asking EAC. Can we give MCQ in the final exam? Now, my question is, can you really go deep with MCQ in the final exam? So I'm asking you back, can you really go deep? Can you really assess deeper as what is required in WP here? And I think that could be a problem, right? That could be a problem. So therefore, I would like to encourage you to shy away from MCQ in a final exam. I think unless you want to prepare MCQ according to the GRE standard, or probably as how the clinical students, the medical students would go through with their MCQ. But then again, when we talk about our MCQ, are we saying that our MCQ would just be more on the very subjective matter? Won't there be any calculation involved? Then you're actually limiting the assessment conduct if you're doing MCQ in the final exam. Okay, when you talk about WK7, that is comprehension, which is addressed in PO6, 7, and 8. So most importantly, how do you look at comprehension? So probably the best assessment is to go on case study, scenario, or probably project-based. And I think there has been many programs now who are actually changing their curriculum. Instead of having a final exam as a final exam, really final exam, the weightage of the final exam has actually been reduced from normally 60 to some of them actually taking it out to almost 40 and even 30. Many of the engineering program are now moving into case study, scenario, and also problem-based study, which I think under the pandemic situation can be dealt much better off in comparative to the final exam. Okay. Now, when we talk about PO10, what is PO10 all about? It is on communication. And when you talk about communication, here is talking about communication in the form of either verbal or written. You can have in so many other forms. Even body language is also a communication. But I think which one is easy to measure, if you want to measure, is definitely verbal and written. So now how can you impart EA into it? Then you have to look at the level of the report, the level of the prototype, and even the drawings. Are they addressing the EAs? And as I already mentioned, EA number 3 is the easiest one to address, which is under innovation. right? And definitely for Viva and presentation, you will look at the EA1, you can also look at EA4, and you also can look at EA5, even in the level of EA2. So look at the assessment, look at the means and ways of how you address the assessment so that you can actually address your PO10 here based on the characteristics on the EAs. All right. I am now pushing up a question to you guys. Taxonomy versus WK versus WP. I'm keeping this particular slide just for you to think on how can you actually address and how you're going to now realign your curriculum and how you're going to align your assessment based on taxonomy versus WK and versus WP. Okay, one fine statement is a difficult question is not necessarily complex, but all complex question is always difficult. So that is a statement that you need to try to digest and look at this particular slide and try to come up with your assessment in the best conduct that you can evidence them out. So this is mapping sample that I would like to share with you. And similarly, the moderation sample. And obviously under QMS, we look at the moderation. What are the moderation being done, right? And this would be a good example to evidence out that you are addressing your WPs and your EAs as well. Okay, now our program outcomes now is stated at 12 and the professional competency is stated at 13. So under GAPC version 4, 2021, the program outcomes or the graduate attributes now will go at 11, but the professional competency will still remain at 13. So I am giving you the introduction to the GAPC version 4, and once it is available online, once everything is cleaned up, then we will share with all of the engineering faculty in the country. So these rubrics are actually the rubric design here is actually taking up the descriptors for the WA and EA characteristics. I'm sharing with all of you, and feel free to use them. If you don't understand it, please email to me and I will be able to explain in detail, because I do not have the time to explain on rubrics alone here, because rubrics do really take another 1 or 2 hours of session to understand them. Okay, so I think 4 minutes before the hour and to the end, the OBE planting cycle. So we are now at the acculturation stage. So I'm putting it up between 2020 to 2030, so that once we have already planted all the OBE spirit in all our students way back since the beginning of the year 2000 until now, they already become adult. So by right, it has now been, become a culture to our society and to mankind. So thank you very much. And basically, my email will be stated down there. Thank you, Dr. Ali. Thank you so much.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Siti Hawa, for the insightful presentation. Talking about should help us in designing our alternative assessment, especially when we have this pandemic, this lockdown with the RTL. Hopefully we can still do it with meeting the requirement of the complex engineering activities and also the complex engineering problems. I think we still have, because we started a bit late, we have about 13 minutes, inshallah. So I would like to invite questions from the participants. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions that will be the participant would like to ask Prof. Siti Hawa today. Okay, let me start with the one that in the chat box. This is from, is it Mrs. Aliani, UPM. Prof. Siti, is one of the slides e-learning is considered as TCL but not SCL. Can you please elaborate on this?
At that time, e-learning was considered as a TCL because it is actually more on the focus of we put all of our material on board, and then we will actually make use of it, and we will make it as a teacher-centered learning, right? Now, you can also take e-learning now with the current platform under SCL, and it can be done both as TCL and SCL. And I think in most of the jurisdiction now, you can also allow your learning to happen through YouTube, right? So when you are requesting your students to actually do their own learning through YouTube, and later when you meet them online for about an hour or probably during your tutorial session, then whatever learning that happened earlier on has become as SCL. It's a student-centered learning, right? And most importantly now, under the e-learning mode, since we are putting all of our documents and our material online, by right, we should not be going through the slides one by one during the interaction session that we have online, because see, the engagement time that we have online should make it, we should make it to the shortest time possible, because I think the first 30 minutes will be good enough for the students to actually really be engaged with you online, because other than that, they will feel bored in a sense that there are many other gadgets that could sit beside them, which you cannot see them in comparative when they are in a class. Because when you are in a class, you can actually conduct several teamwork effort, which they are properly engaged. Unless you are actually using some kind of a platform that can allow them to engage in a breakout room, then it will be a very good SEL mode. Otherwise, it will be more of a teaching-centered learning, teacher-centered learning. So I hope that would answer Aliani from UPM. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next one, Dr. Dila.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Okay, Prof, my question might deviate a little bit from the topic. Okay, so basically, we now had our graduates from SPM graduates applying for courses, right? Okay, so recently, I think like 1 or 2 weeks ago, there is this one statement or in FB, in Twitter, saying that adik-adik jangan ambil engineering, don't go and take engineering. Okay. So I was just
kenapa
flipping.
Dia tulis kenapa? Jangan ambil engineering sebab apa?
And then I was going through the comments because it's interesting to me. And some, of course, there are pros and cons. Some said you should equip yourself with other certificates to make yourself more marketable and so on. But there are also professionals or basically engineers who are already in the field saying the same thing. Basically because they are saying what you learn is, I mean, during your learning time is very difficult, but when you go to work, the salary does not match, you know. Yeah. So in a way, when we have our students, we will face this kind of question as well, because with all the complex engineering elements, with all the complex engineering activities, so we need to impart this to our student, right? But at the same time, the student will ask, what is the, you know, what is the purpose of all this if at the end of the day I might as well join human science or Islamic whatever and become a celebrity, that sort of thing, kan? So what is your take on that, if you care to share with us? Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Dila, the thing is, I think first and foremost, the career and counseling guidance in the school, I don't blame them, but there are many who are actually not knowledgeable enough to share, you know, the experiences of the duty of becoming an engineer. Okay, now we see there are so many people who also do not want to become doctors, right? Even though doctors is known to be highly paid if you are working in the private sector. But then again, it comes with the working time. the odd hours, the on-call. So nothing comes easy on a silver platter, right? So now, the most important thing in how we could actually impart this info to our youngsters is to say that our engineering fraternity goes beyond Malaysia. We are not just supplying our graduates to Malaysia. We are supplying our graduates to 20 other countries. With Malaysia is 21. We are supplying our graduates to other countries. We are not asking you to only get job in Malaysia. You can get job overseas. So if you think that you can penetrate America, you can penetrate UK, you can penetrate Japan, Korea, then the big bucks may come from there, right? I think in Malaysia, it so happened that probably we will see that the medical students are getting highly paid, quote unquote, because they are working in the government, right? And the number of medical doctors is now increasing, and you have seen already in the newspaper that there are many of those students, actually graduates, who have not got places for housemanship as well. Dia orang pun menganggur juga dah setahun, right? So you will come to a situation what we are facing with our engineering graduates is faced by the medical graduates as well, right? So they might as well become nurses, they might as well become, geriatric nurses, because they can actually charge 3,000-4,000 a month to just do a daytime care to any of the warga mas, right? Rather than they go and work as a nurse in the hospital or nurse in any of the fraternities. So similarly, that is going to happen in our country to the other graduates as well. Now you can see there are so many business graduates. What happened to the business graduates? There are also issues, right? And there are so many of those business graduates and even the banking graduates who still are not getting any job. But at least in terms of engineering, right? If they do not want to become engineers, take up the diploma program, take up the Bachelor of Engineering Technology program, where they will be the doer. They will be the doer. They are not going to be the main critical thinker. And if you look through in many of our development in the country, we have lots of development, the infrastructure development that requires this kind of engineering thing. So I think for some of the engineers who may share their experiences, it could be out of their frustration that they're not getting the payment as what they thought they should be paying. But the way that we're going to market the program to our future SPM leavers is to see that we are not supplying just to the Malaysian market. We are supplying you to the outside market. And that may actually become a good take for them, inshallah. Thank you. Hope that answers you, Dr. Dila. Okay.
You're muted, Dr. Dila. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Prof. Siti Hawa for the answer, and Dr. Dila for the question. Next one, I'd like to invite Prof. Teddy. He is one of the experts in our Kulliyyah and our faculty, Prof.
No, still learning. Thank you, Dr. Ali. Prof. Siti Hawa, this very informative presentation on WP and EA. So I have, from the presentation, I have impression that every courses at least need to contribute to the WP and EA, but some are DNA, something like delivered but not assessed. Some are assessed by using the rubric.
Yes.
So for rubric, maybe we can show to the EIC panel. But how about the DNA, the delivered but not assessed? How can we convince the EIC panel that we did delivered but it is not assessed? The WP and EA. Yeah, thank you.
Probably you can actually show with the outcomes that you may normally, for instance, in the EA, okay, if anything to do on communication, the way that I did when I was at the university was to actually get my students to actually share whatever discussion that they've done on IG platform, on their own IG platform. So therefore, that will become a good evidences of them having that kind of an activity, rather than I have to record and then probably gather all the evidences. So those kind of one simple activity where they will actually show all the evidences of their discussion through their IG platform, which then I will note as part of parcel of the formative assessment. That means they have done it. Good. There is no marks. It is a formative assessment. So I am forming them so that they are able to actually talk well, discuss well, and probably present well. Or even sometimes to the extent that when they were doing their presentation in the class, I will not give them any grades, but I will make comments. And that particular comments must be mentioned in the upcoming class of what is the reflection of that particular exercise that we've done in the last class. So that will be a good example on how we could actually get the evidences through our EA. But anything to do with your WP, it can be done in the form of the formative assessment where you don't grade them, but you still will be able to evidence them out because you want them to do, and they will still submit. Submit in the sense of you just want to see whether they are actually doing things in the right order or not. Because if they don't, then you have the time for them to actually improve and resubmit. So those are the activities that you can actually impart to the students in terms of the evidences. And don't forget, the panel actually will ask the students. There will be a session where panel will actually interview the students. So students will actually relate. Okay, when I attended a Prof. Teddy's class, he will make sure that we have to do this particular assignment until we get it right. Do you get marks for it? No marks. So we know that it's a formative assessment and you are actually addressing on the WP component. Right? Okay, Prof.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. So now comes to the last question.
Okay.
Dr. Marina from USIM? Yes, you can start your question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prof, for the talk. My question is actually more towards the future. When you actually showed us just now that the GAPC, that the motion was passed last night, you said. So
yes.
I sort of captured that you said that the implementation was supposed to take place in 2024.
Exactly.
And then you did say that the PO will be reduced from 12 to 11.
Yes.
So what sort of timeline are we talking about here? Because I remember that you said between 2021 to 2024 will be the roadmap, but the implementation will actually start in 2024. What exactly is meant by implementation? Because as we know, the minute the PO is changed, then we actually have to redo, we have to remap, and then we have to adjust our cost outline, we have to get the stakeholders input, we have to bring it back to the Senate, inform the MQA, so the processing time from the quality assurance is at least 1 year. So what is implementation here, and what is sort of timeline are we talking about? Thank you.
Okay, so now when we mentioned about the roadmap 2021 to 2024, so basically now EAD, the EAC and the ETEC Council will have to sit down, and are we going to reduce our 12 PO to 11 PO as what mentioned under the GAPC version 4? If we are going, during the pre-IEA meeting, we have actually discussed about this. And we were, our department has already done some kind of a mapping. And how they deal with is they have actually put the SDG in some of the other components of the POs, rather than to concentrate SDG in one PO, which is in our case, we did it in our PO 7. So one possible shortcut manner that we can do is to address PO7 in most of our courses. That could be one way. But there are also other elements of the SDG that they are looking into. That is especially on the 4IR, on the AI, on the big data, on some other component of the future. So thereby, we may have to revise our POs, but currently we are saying that we want to maintain at 12 POs, but 2 of the POs were mapped to one of those of the GAPC version 4. But the most important thing is now to look at the description that is being mentioned in each of the statement. As what we have already mentioned, as what I've already shared earlier on, in our PO statements, we do mention about the knowledge profile to all of the statements, right? You will see that PO1 right up to PO7 and PO8 will have all the WK. It is mentioned in that particular, is specifically mentioned in the particular statements. So therefore, in the GAPC version 4, there are introduction of WK9. WK9 is on attitude, which is on ethics. So how can that be parked in a particular POs that is being addressed under the GAPC version 4? So what we're going to do is our EAC Council and our ETEC Council, we already have our own working group on standard, and we will first study those particular changes. Then only we will pass it on to the IHL for IHL to look into. So therefore, we will take about a year and a half before we actually pass it on to all of you. But that doesn't mean that we want to stop you from having a look first at what GAPC version 2021 is all about. So that you will, whenever you need to do any curriculum review, we will do hand in hand and you will be aligned together with the EAC standard and also the ETEC standard. So probably we will have ETEC standard 2022 or 2023. We're still not sure about that because it is just fresh last night, but we already have a plan on how we are going to move about with this. So don't worry too much, Dr. Marina. The most important thing is the WP, the EA, the WK must be there in your assessment.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Okay.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Siti Hawa, for the answer. Yeah, unfortunately, our time is very limited, Prof. I'm sure that there will be lots of more questions if we have more time. Yeah, but because of time is very limited, then we would like to start with the next session. Thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Siti Hawa, for your time, for your
so much
knowledge and experience.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. So just email me at any time you wish, then probably I will answer it through the email. Yeah. All right. So I have to leave now because I have to get set to another meeting. All right. Thank you very much for having me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Bye.